The University of New York campus was alive with the hustle and bustle of students heading to classes, all immersed in their own worlds of ambition and excitement. It was the kind of place where dreams were made and futures were shaped. Ethan Carter walked across the quad, his backpack slung over one shoulder, his eyes scanning the crowd. A senior, Ethan had always been known for his intelligence and hard work. But what truly set him apart was his unshakable belief that he could rise above the challenges life had thrown his way. Coming from a modest background, he wasn't like many of the students here who came from wealthy families or prestigious lineages. His family had always been supportive, but their financial struggles meant Ethan had to work twice as hard to make it to this point. Yet, he never complained. His eyes were always fixed on the future, on what he could achieve. But there was one person on this campus who caught his attention more than anyone else, Siva Mitchell. She was the kind of woman who walked into a room and commanded attention without trying. Gorgeous, brilliant, and from one of the wealthiest families in the city, Ava was the epitome of success. She was known not only for her academic achievements, but for her poised, graceful presence, making her an icon of the upper class. The first time Ethan saw her, he couldn't take his eyes off her. Ava was everything he wasn't: beautiful, confident, and born into privilege. Yet there was something in her eyes, a depth he couldn't quite place. Something told him she wasn't just another spoiled rich girl, and that intrigued him more than anything. It was a late afternoon in October when their paths first crossed. They were both assigned to the same group for a semester-long business project in their Economics 101 class. Ethan was nervous. While he was confident in his academic abilities, the idea of working alongside Ava, someone with a family name like hers, made him uneasy. He had no idea what to expect. "Ava Mitchell?" Ethan asked as he walked up to her in the library. She was sitting alone, her textbooks spread out across the table. Her long brown hair cascaded over her shoulders, and she was intensely focused on her work. Ava looked up, her hazel eyes meeting his. There was a flicker of recognition, but she didn't smile. "You must be Ethan," she said, her voice calm and assured. "I've heard a lot about you." The guy with the perfect GPA. Ethan chuckled nervously, scratching the back of his neck. "Yeah, well, I try my best. I guess we're partners for the project." Ava smiled slightly, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was one of polite acknowledgement. "I assume we should discuss the outline for the project, then." From that point on, their meetings became a routine. They worked together almost every day, first in the library, then in various cafes around campus. As the weeks went by, Ethan began to notice something he hadn't expected. Ava wasn't as unapproachable as he first thought. She had a sharp intellect, and her ideas about business were unique and practical. They disagreed at times, but it was the kind of disagreement that pushed them both to think deeper, to challenge each other's views, despite their growing intellectual connection. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to her. Every time their eyes met, he saw something. Maybe it was vulnerability or just a quiet longing, but it was enough to make his heart race. Every time they worked late into the night, one evening, after a particularly long study session, they stepped out of the library together. The air was cool, the campus lights casting long shadows across the pavement. "I'm glad we're almost done with this project," Ava said, her tone light but tired. "It's been ... exhausting." Ethan smiled, adjusting his backpack. "I know, but I think we've made good progress. You're a lot more fun to work with than I thought." Ava laughed, a soft, melodic sound that took him by surprise. "You know, I thought the same thing. I didn't expect you to be this easy to talk to." They walked in silence for a few moments, but it wasn't awkward. It was comfortable, almost like they had known each other for years. When they reached the campus gate, they paused. "Good night, Ethan," Ava said, her voice softer now, the usual businesslike tone gone. "Good night, Ava," Ethan replied, his heart beating a little faster than usual. As he watched her walk away, something shifted inside him. He didn't know what it was. Maybe it was just the exhaustion of a long semester, or maybe it was something more. But for the first time, he couldn't shake the thought that maybe, just maybe, there was more to their connection than just academic rivalry. Weeks passed, and their project was finally complete. They received one of the highest grades in the class, and both of them were praised by their professor. But the satisfaction of the success didn't ease the growing tension that had developed between them. They were both aware of it, but neither of them addressed it. Ava was from a family that was far above Ethan in terms of wealth and status, and though she seemed to enjoy spending time with him, there was a feeling that something was always holding her back. It wasn't until the end of the semester that Ethan gathered the courage to confront it. They met at a quiet park near campus, sitting on a bench overlooking the city skyline. "Ava," Ethan began, his voice hesitant, "there's something I've been meaning to say." Ava looked at him, her expression unreadable. "What is it?" Ethan took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. "I really enjoy spending time with you, more than I thought I would, and I don't know if it's just me, but I think there's something between us." Ava's eyes softened, but she didn't smile. Ethan eyed before she could finish. Her phone rang. She looked down at it, her expression tightening. "It's my parents," she muttered, standing up quickly. "I have to go. I'll talk to you later." Without another word, she walked away, leaving Ethan sitting alone on the bench, a heavy feeling in his chest. It had been a year since Ava walked away from him, and with each passing day, Ethan Carter felt the weight of that moment pressing on his chest. The bench he had sat on, the park where they last talked, those memories haunted him, but they also pushed him forward. He had never told Ava how much he wanted their relationship to work, how much he cared for her, but now it was too late. Or so he thought. The months following their final conversation were a blur. Ethan threw himself into his studies, his work, and eventually his career. He buried himself in everything he could control, trying to push aside the lingering feelings for Ava. He had to make something of himself, not for anyone else, but for him, for the man he had always believed he could be. The year after their partying, Ethan graduated with honors and moved to San Francisco to pursue a job at a tech startup. The transition was difficult, as it always is when moving to a new city, but the promise of building something from the ground up kept him going. He worked long hours, often staying late into the night. coding, brainstorming, and networking, doing everything necessary to prove that he was more than just the boy from the wrong side of town. The tech world was fast-paced and cutthroat, but Ethan thrived in it. He quickly made a name for himself as a brilliant developer with an eye for innovation. And within 2 years, he was promoted to senior management. But his success didn't feel like success, not entirely. It didn't fill the hole in his chest, the one left by the loss of Ava. 2 years later, the opportunity came knocking. Ethan was offered a chance to join a larger tech company, Blackstone Enterprises, as the head of a new project. The pay was outstanding, the responsibilities massive, But the real appeal was that Blackstone Enterprises was about to launch a new venture that could change the game in the industry. The kind of opportunity Ethan couldn't pass up. This promotion marked a turning point. The work felt different. It wasn't just about building his career anymore. It was about taking risks and doing something that would make a real impact. He threw himself into the work even more than before, pushing himself harder than ever. But even then, despite his achievements and newfound success, Ava lingered in the back of his mind. She was there in the quiet moments when he stared out the window of his office at the city lights. Ava Mitchell, on the other hand, had moved forward with her life as well. She had graduated and worked with her family's investment firm, Mitchell Enterprises, stepping into the spotlight as one of the youngest female executives in the firm's history. But the success came with a heavy price. Ava's life was full of expectations. Every move she made was scrutinized, every decision judged, despite the privilege that came with being born into wealth. Ava felt the suffocating pressure of her family's ambitions for her. Every relationship she had, every choice she made, was viewed through the lens of status, family legacy, and power. She'd been with high-profile men, successful in their own right, but none of them had ever made her feel the way Ethan did. He had been the one man who never looked at her as a status symbol, who didn't care about her last name or her family's wealth. He saw her for who she was, not what she represented. And that, she realized now, was what she missed the most. Months passed. Ava had been dealing with the stress of family business and her role within the company. But despite her busy schedule, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. Ethan's face, his smile, his quiet ambition, they haunted her. Then, one day, she received an invitation to a business gala in San Francisco, an exclusive event that was going to showcase the brightest minds in technology and business. Ava hadn't planned on attending, but when she saw the guest list, her heart skipped a beat. Ethan Carter, the man who had once captured her heart, was going to be there. She hesitated. Could she really face him after all this time? After everything that happened? After the pain she caused him by choosing her family over their love? But there was something inside her, a nagging feeling that she needed closure, that she needed to see him again. The night of the gala, the lights were dazzling. The event took place in one of the most luxurious venues in the city, with high ceilings, crystal chandeliers, and the scent of expensive champagne in the air. Ava walked through the crowd, her heart racing. She was dressed in a sleek, black dress that hugged her figure, her brown hair styled perfectly as she entered the main hall. Her eyes scanned the room. Investors, executives, and top-tier tech figures surrounded her. And then she saw him. Ethan. He was standing near the bar, a glass of whiskey in his hand, talking with a few colleagues. He had changed. He was no longer the shy, insecure guy she once knew. He looked confident, polished, and every bit the successful entrepreneur he had become. His sharp jawline, the same thoughtful expression she remembered. Everything about him was different, yet familiar. Their eyes met across the room. It took a moment before Ethan's gaze locked with hers. His face showed no immediate surprise, no anger, just calm recognition. Ava's heart skipped a beat. She felt as though the years between them had melted away. Despite everything that had happened, she could still feel the connection between them. The memories rushed back, the late nights they had spent talking, the way his smile had always made her feel safe, the love that they once shared. Ethan took a slow sip from his glass and then walked toward her. His expression was neutral, but there was something behind his eyes that Ava couldn't quite read. Ava, he said, his voice calm, but with a hint of something deeper. I didn't expect to see you here. Ava smiled weakly, her eyes softening. I wasn't sure I would either, but I guess fate works in mysterious ways. There was a brief silence as they stood there, the noise of the gala continuing around them. Neither of them moved, both unsure of how to navigate this encounter. The history between them, good and bad, lingered in the air. The gala was in full swing. The shimmering lights of the event illuminated the large ballroom, casting reflections across the crystal chandeliers. The city's skyline outside the floor-to-ceiling windows glittered in the distance. Ava Mitchell stood near the entrance, adjusting her dress, a sleek black number that hugged her figure just right. She could feel the weight of her decision to come here tonight. It wasn't a decision she'd taken lightly. After years of avoiding Ethan, of denying herself the chance to confront the past, she had finally given in. Her gaze searched the room, falling on the familiar face she had never quite forgotten, even though so much time had passed. Ethan was standing by the bar, deep in conversation with several colleagues, his broad shoulders and calm presence making him stand out among the crowd. When their eyes met across the room, the air around them seemed to shift, and suddenly, everything felt like it had stopped. A moment passed before Ethan gave a slight nod, as if acknowledging her presence. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes told a different story. There was no anger, no resentment, just a quiet intensity. Ava took a deep breath, steeling herself, before making her way toward him. She could hear her heart pounding in her chest. Every step felt like it was bringing her closer to something she wasn't sure she was ready for. When she finally reached him, Ethan stood tall, his usual confidence replacing the awkwardness he must have felt just moments before. Ava, he said, his voice steady but with a trace of hesitation. It's good to see you. Her chest tightened at the sound of his voice, so familiar, yet so distant. It's good to see you too, Ethan, she replied softly. I didn't expect to see you here. Well, this is the kind of event I can't miss, he said, gesturing toward the crowd. But I have to admit, seeing you again, it wasn't something I anticipated. There was a brief silence as they stood there, unsure of how to navigate the years that had passed between them. I didn't know if you'd want to speak to me, Ava said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. After everything, Ethan gave her a small, almost sad smile. You don't have to apologize, Ava. We both know why things ended the way they did. He paused, his expression softening. But I'll admit, part of me hoped that we'd find a way back to this moment. Ava's heart skipped a beat. She began, but she faltered. What could she say? How could she explain everything that had happened between them? How could she explain the weight of her family's expectations, the pressure they had placed on her? Ethan leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. Ava, I've spent the last few years trying to understand what went wrong, why you chose to walk away. I know it wasn't easy for you, but I never really got the full story. Why didn't you fight for us? Why didn't you fight for what we had? Ava swallowed hard, the emotions she had buried for so long threatening to resurface. She had avoided thinking about this moment for years, telling herself that she had made the right choice. But now, standing here with Ethan, everything felt different. I didn't know how, she admitted, her voice thick with emotion. I thought I had to choose between you and my family. I thought that I could have both, but in the end, I couldn't. I was afraid of losing them, Ethan. I was afraid of what would happen if I chose UF. I chose what I really wanted. There it was. The truth, finally. The confession that had been on the tip of her tongue for years, but had never fully escaped. She had chosen her family's expectations over her heart, and the weight of that decision had haunted her every single day since. Ethan's eyes softened as he looked at her, but there was still pain in his gaze. "So, what you're saying is that you never really gave us a chance," he said quietly, his voice tinged with hurt. "You never even tried to fight for us." Ava felt the tears pricking at the corners of her eyes. She had been so scared, so terrified of what her family would think, of how she would be judged. But hearing Ethan say it out loud made her realize how much she had lost. "I'm sorry, Ethan, I didn't know how," she whispered, barely able to meet his eyes. For a moment, the two of them stood in silence, the weight of the years of separation, regret, and unspoken words hanging heavy in the air. Finally, Ethan spoke again, his voice softer now, more vulnerable than before. "Ava, I spent so many years thinking I wasn't good enough for you, that my background, my family, my circumstances, they were never going to be enough for you. But when I saw you again tonight, I realized something. I wasn't just doing this for me. I was doing it for us, for what we could have had if we hadn't let the world tear us apart." Ava's heart fluttered at his words. Ethan had been the one to walk away first, but she realized now that he had been fighting his own battles. He had been fighting for something he could never have, something that was taken from him the moment she had chosen her family over him. "You were always enough, Ethan," Ava said, her voice steadying. "I should have fought for us. I should have stood up to my family and said no. But I didn't." Ethan took a deep breath, as though processing everything she had said. "It's not too late, Ava," he said, his voice filled with conviction. "We can still make this work. But I need to know that you're willing to fight for it too. I need to know that you're not going to let the past control us anymore." Ava met his gaze, her heart racing. This was the moment where she could choose to fix everything, to take the leap, to be with him without the fear of judgment or expectations. "I'm willing," she said, her voice firm with determination. "But we both have to be willing." The tension that had built up between them began to dissipate, replaced by something softer, more promising. For the first time, they both felt like they were standing on equal ground, ready to face the future together. "We'll take it slow," Ethan said, offering her a gentle smile. "But I'm willing to try, Ava, to make it work." "If you are," Ava nodded, her heart swelling with emotion. "I am Ethan. I've always been," as they stood there in that quiet moment. Surrounded by the noise and chaos of the gala, they knew that this was just the beginning. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long time, they were ready to face it together. The days following their heartfelt conversation were filled with both hope and anxiety. Ethan and Ava had agreed to give their relationship another chance, but both knew that nothing could ever be the same as it was before. The weight of their family's expectations, the judgments of society, and the emotional scars from their past were all still present, lurking in the background, threatening to tear them apart once again. For Ava, the pressure was overwhelming. Her family, especially her father, had always made it clear that her success was tied to the people she associated with. Ethan, with his modest beginnings and lack of powerful connections, was everything her family disapproved of. She knew that they would never accept him, and despite how deeply she cared for him, a part of her still felt bound by her duty to her family, as much as she wanted to fight for their love. The fear of losing her family's approval held her back. But Ethan had changed. and Ava had changed too. Now, the question was, could they overcome these insurmountable obstacles? Ava sat at her desk one afternoon, staring at the stack of papers in front of her. Her phone buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. It was a message from Ethan. "Ethan, dinner tonight. I want to talk about the next step." Ava smiled softly at the message, as much as she feared the consequences of being with him. There was something undeniably comforting about being around Ethan. His presence felt like home, a place where she could breathe without worrying about the world around her. Ava sure, where? "Ethan, I'll pick you up at 7. Later that evening, as Ethan pulled up to her apartment in his sleek black car, Ava couldn't help but feel a flutter of excitement in her chest. It was still hard to believe that they were even in this position. After everything that had happened, they were trying again. But the nagging feeling of doubt was still there. Pulling at her, "Ava," Ethan said softly as she slid into the car, his eyes scanning her face as if looking for any sign of hesitation. "Are you sure about this? I mean, really sure?" Ava met his gaze, her heart racing. "I'm sure," she said quietly, "but I know it won't be easy. My family, they won't just let this happen." Ethan nodded, his grip tightening on the steering wheel. "We'll figure it out," he said firmly. "We'll face them together." But deep down, Ethan knew it wouldn't be that simple. He had seen how Ava struggled with the expectations of her family, how she was constantly torn between the man she loved and the life they had planned for her. And though he was more than ready to fight for their love, he wasn't sure how much more she could endure. The restaurant was upscale, with soft lighting and quiet jazz music playing in the background. They sat at a corner table, the candlelight casting flickering shadows across their faces. Ethan could tell that Ava was deep in thought, her usual calm demeanor replaced by a distant look in her eyes. "Ava," Ethan said, reaching across the table to take her hand, "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about how hard it is for you to choose between me and your family. I get it, I really do. But you need to understand something." Ava looked up at him, her gaze softening. "What?" "You don't have to choose, not like that," Ethan said, his voice full of emotion. "I don't need you to choose between me and your family. I just need you to be with me. I'll support you through whatever comes our way, but I won't stand by and watch you destroy yourself to make other people happy." Ava swallowed, the lump in her throat growing. She had never heard him speak like this before. Ethan had always been strong, confident, and driven, but tonight he was showing her a vulnerability she hadn't seen. He was opening up in a way that made her realize how much he had truly changed. "I don't want to lose you, Ava," he continued, his voice steady but full of feeling. "But I can't make this decision for you. You have to choose what makes you happy. If that's with me, I'll be right here. If it's not, then I'll have to respect that." Ava felt her heart break at his words. She had never realized how much Ethan had endured for their relationship, how much he had tried to suppress his own feelings to protect her. He had always put her first, even when it meant sacrificing his own happiness. "I don't want to lose you either." "Ethan," she whispered, her eyes brimming with tears, "but I don't know how to fix this. How do I face my family? How do I face the world when I'm already so far in?" Ethan gently squeezed her hand, a reassuring smile crossing his face. "We'll face them together, one step at a time. No matter what happens, I'll be by your side." As the night wore on, Ava and Ethan talked about everything, their past, their future, and the obstacles they both knew they would face. But there was one thing that became clear. They were both willing to fight for each other, no matter the cost. By the end of the evening, Ava felt a sense of calm she hadn't felt in a long time. For the first time in months, she felt like she could breathe again. Like she could finally have the life she had always wanted, if only she had the courage to fight for it. The next morning, Ava woke up with a sense of clarity. She didn't know exactly how to proceed, but she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to let fear control her anymore. She had Ethan. She had a chance at happiness, and this time, she was going to take it. The weeks that followed their heartfelt conversation at dinner were filled with uncertainty. But there was also a sense of determination. Ava had decided she could no longer let her family's expectations control her every move. Ethan had shown her a side of him that she hadn't realized. Existed the vulnerability and honesty that she had always needed but never saw before, for the first time in years. Ava was willing to take risks. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but she was ready to fight for the life and love she had always wanted. However, the hardest part was still ahead. It was a Saturday morning when Ava found herself standing outside her father's office. The grand doors of the Mitchell Enterprises building loomed before her, a reminder of the world she had always known, a world where every decision, every move had been scrutinized, measured, and judged. Her father, Richard Mitchell, had built his empire from the ground up, and he had always expected the same kind of ambition from his daughter. Ava had spent her entire life trying to live up to his expectations, following the path that had been laid out for her. But now, after everything that had happened, she knew she had to make her own decisions. She couldn't let fear of disappointing him control her any longer. She took a deep breath, gathering the courage she had found in Ethan's words. Today, she was going to face her father and stand up for what she truly wanted. Richard Mitchell sat behind his large oak desk, looking over some financial reports when the door opened. Without looking up, he spoke. "Ava, come in." "What is it?" Ava stepped into the room, her posture straight, her expression determined. "Dad, we need to talk." Richard glanced up from his papers, raising an eyebrow. "About what?" "About me," Ava said, her voice steady. "About my future. And about Ethan." Richard's face hardened at the mention of Ethan's name. He knew exactly where this was going, and he didn't like it. "Ava, you know where I stand on this. I've told you before that man is not someone you should be involved with. He doesn't have the right connections, the right family name. He's not in our league." Ava's heart skipped a beat at his harsh words, but she didn't flinch. She had made up her mind. "I don't care about the name or the connections or the family legacy anymore," she said, her voice louder now. "What matters is who I am and who I choose to be with. And I choose Ethan." Richard's eyes narrowed. "Ava, this is not a decision you should make impulsively. You have a future to think about. A future that doesn't involve being with someone who doesn't have the means to provide for you the way I can. He will drag you down, and you'll regret it. I've spent my whole life doing what you want, following your rules," Ava said, her voice tinged with frustration. "But this is my life, Dad. I get to choose who I love, who I'm with, and I'm not going to live in the shadow of your expectations anymore." For the first time, Richard's stern facade cracked slightly, though his anger remained. "You think you can just throw everything away because of a man who isn't even worthy of you?" "Ethan is worthy of me," Ava said firmly. "He may not have the wealth or the status you want for me, but he has something more important: honor, integrity, and love. And I can't ignore that anymore. There was a long, tense silence in the room. Richard didn't speak for a few moments, and Ava could see the disappointment and frustration in his eyes. But something inside her had shifted. She wasn't the same girl who had cowered before his expectations all those years. She was her own person now. "I'm not asking for your approval, Dad," Ava said, her voice finally breaking through the tension. "I just want you to understand that this is my choice, and I'm not going to let you control it anymore." Richard leaned back in his chair, the anger still simmering beneath the surface. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by his own daughter. But he could see that Ava wasn't backing down. "You're making a mistake," he said, his tone softer now, but still filled with authority. "I may be," she replied, standing tall, "but it's my mistake to make." With that, Ava turned and walked out of her father's office, leaving him in stunned silence. Later that day, Ethan called. Ava hadn't told him about her conversation with her father yet, but he could hear it in her voice when she answered the phone. "Hey, how did it go?" Ethan asked, his voice filled with concern. Ava leaned against the wall, her heart still racing from the confrontation. "I told him," she said softly, her voice a mixture of relief and fear. "I told him that I choose you, that I want to be with you, and that I won't live my life according to his expectations anymore." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Ethan didn't know what to say. He had always known how much Ava's family mattered to her, how difficult it was for her to break free from their grip. But hearing that she had made this decision gave him a new sense of admiration for her. "You're incredible, Ava," he finally said, his voice filled with emotion. "I don't know what to say, but I'm so proud of you." "I'm scared," she admitted. "I don't know what's going to happen next. My family might cut me off. They might never forgive me." Ethan's voice was firm, confident. "We'll face it together. Whatever happens, we'll handle it together. I'm not going anywhere." Ava smiled, feeling the warmth of his words wash over her. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she was finally on the right path. The weight of her father's expectations, the burden of her past decisions, they didn't seem so heavy anymore. Not with Ethan by her side. The weeks after Ava's bold decision to stand up to her father were filled with both a sense of liberation and deep uncertainty. She had finally made her choice, Ethan, and though she felt a sense of freedom, the weight of her family's disappointment still hung over her like a dark cloud. She had lost her father's approval, and while that stung, she knew she had done the right thing for herself. Ethan, on the other hand, was proud of her, but the reality of the situation began to settle in. They couldn't hide from the truth. Ava was still part of a world that Ethan had never belonged to. The lines between their different worlds were blurred, but not gone. And while he had the love and support of Ava, he couldn't help but wonder how long would this last. Would her family truly cut her off, or would they make her feel guilty enough to return to them? Ava spent her days focusing on work, doing everything she could to prove to herself that her decision wasn't just an emotional one, but the right one for her future. She threw herself into her role at Mitchell Enterprises, working closely with her team, determined to show that she could still make a mark in the family business, even without the influence of her father. But every time she walked into her father's office for meetings, she could feel the tension in the air. Her father's coldness was palpable, his disappointment evident. Her mother, though more understanding, still tried to convince her that she needed to fix things with her father. As much as Ava tried to remain strong, the cracks in her armor were beginning to show. Every glance from her father, Every conversation with her mother about the future she was throwing away chipped away at her resolve. Meanwhile, Ethan had been busy with his new project at Blackstone Enterprises. The tech giant had just signed a massive contract, and the project he was leading had the potential to be revolutionary. But Ethan couldn't shake the thoughts of Ava. Despite his success, despite everything he had accomplished on his own, there was still a part of him that felt like an outsider, especially when he thought about Ava's family. One evening, after a long day at the office, Ethan sat at his desk, staring at his computer screen, not seeing the code in front of him. He picked up his phone and hesitated before sending a text to Ava. Ethan, "Hey, do you want to grab dinner tonight? We need to talk." It wasn't a text he had planned to send, but the words came out before he could stop himself. After everything that had happened, they hadn't had the chance to truly talk about what was next for them. And more importantly, Ethan realized he needed to know where they stood. A few minutes later, his phone buzzed with her reply, "Ava, I'd like that. Same place as last time." Ethan smiled, feeling a sense of relief. Even though things weren't perfect, she was still willing to be there with him at the restaurant. Ethan and Ava found themselves sitting at their usual table, the quiet corner that had become their place of refuge. The lights were dim, the soft hum of conversations around them blending into the background. But tonight, there was a heavy silence between them. More than usual, "Ava," Ethan began, his voice tentative, "I know we've been through a lot lately. I know you're struggling with your family, and honestly, I don't know how to fix it. But I need you to know that I'm here, no matter what." Ava looked at him, her gaze soft, but filled with uncertainty. "I appreciate that, Ethan. But there's something I've been feeling lately. I've been feeling like I'm losing myself in this, in trying to please my family, in trying to make everything work for them. And I don't want to lose you. But I also don't want to lose who I am." Ethan leaned forward, taking her hand gently. "Ava, I don't want you to lose yourself either. You're more than just the daughter of Mitchell Enterprises. You're more than the expectations they've placed on you. You're someone who has always been so much more than I could have ever imagined. And I want you to know that whatever you choose, whether it's with me, with them, or something else, I'll support you. But I want you to be happy." Ava swallowed, feeling the weight of his words. She had spent so long trying to meet the expectations of her family, trying to live up to their dreams for her. But Ethan's words struck a chord deep within her. She realized that she had been neglecting her own happiness, always looking for validation from others. "Ethan," she said quietly, "I'm so torn. I don't want to disappoint my family, but I also don't want to lose you. I don't know how to reconcile these two worlds. But I'm trying. I really am." Ethan squeezed her hand. "And I'm trying to, Ava. I've spent so many years questioning whether I was good enough for you. But now I see that it's not about being good enough. It's about being true to ourselves. And right now, I just want you to be happy. If you're happy with me, then I'll be the happiest man alive." They sat in silence for a few moments, each of them lost in their thoughts. There was so much left unsaid, so many hurdles to overcome. But for the first time in a long time, both of them felt like they were on the same page. The road ahead was still unclear. But Ethan and Ava knew that no matter what happened, they were willing to face it together. They had both fought their own battles, but now it was time to fight for each other. The next few days were filled with even more challenges. Ava had a meeting with her father that she had been dreading for weeks. He was determined to convince her to leave Ethan to return to the family business and uphold the legacy he had built. But Ava was determined not to let her father's power define her anymore. She walked into his office with a sense of resolve, her back straight, her heart pounding. "Dad," she said, her voice steady, "I've made my decision. I'm going to be with Ethan, and I'm going to keep working at Mitchell Enterprises. But I won't let you control my life anymore." Richard Mitchell's eyes narrowed. "Ava, you're making a mistake. You'll regret this. Ethan doesn't belong in our world." Ava met his gaze without flinching. "I'm sorry you feel that way, but I need to live my life for myself, not for you." The days following Ava's confrontation with her father felt like a strange balance of relief and dread. She had stood up for herself, for the first time in her life, and yet she knew that her family wasn't going to let her go so easily. The weight of her decision to be with Ethan had started to sink in, and as much as she believed it was the right one, she couldn't ignore the sense of unease that followed her everywhere. Ethan, on the other hand, had been focusing on his work at Blackstone Enterprises, trying to build his position in the business world. His confidence had grown, and with it, his determination to make a life for himself and Ava life that didn't rely on his past or the expectations of her family. But in the back of his mind, he still worried about what would happen if Ava's family refused to accept their relationship. Could they truly have a future together if her world was still at odds with his? It was a Friday afternoon when Ethan received a call from an unexpected source. The number was unrecognized, but the voice on the other end sent a chill down his spine. "Mr. Carter," the voice said, smooth and calm but with an edge of authority. "I have some business that I think you'll want to hear." Ethan's stomach twisted. He knew exactly who this was. It was Mark Reynolds, a business rival from his past, someone who had always held a grudge against him, someone who had been more than willing to make Ethan's life difficult in the past. But this time, it was personal. He wasn't just targeting Ethan's business. He was targeting his relationship with Ava. "I'm listening," Ethan replied, his voice steady, though he could feel the adrenaline coursing through him. "I'm sure you've heard of the Mitchell family's little empire," Mark said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "You know, the company that your little girlfriend is so keen on keeping alive. Well, it's in trouble. The board's starting to get restless, and I think they're going to need someone to step in and take control." Ethan's heart sank. He had heard the rumors about Mitchell Enterprises, but this was something else. Mark was trying to play a dangerous game, and Ethan knew that Ava would be caught in the middle of it. "Leave her out of this," Ethan said, his voice hardening. "You're talking about business, not personal lives. I won't let you drag Ava into your schemes." "Oh, but Ava is the key to all of this, isn't she?" Mark laughed coldly. "You know how these things work, Ethan. Families like hers don't just let go of their power. If you're planning to get anywhere with her, you better be prepared to take on a lot more than just a few board members." Ethan slammed his hand on the desk, frustration and anger surging through him. "I won't let you use her against me. Do whatever you want with my company, but leave her out of it." There was a long pause before Mark spoke again, his voice colder than before. "I don't think you understand, Ethan. Ava is the only thing that matters. If you think you can just waltz in and take what's rightfully hers, you're gravely mistaken." Ethan's mind was racing. He knew this was bad. He knew Mark was a dangerous man, willing to do anything to get what he wanted. But now it was personal. This wasn't just a business deal. It was an attack on everything he had built and everything he had worked for. And more importantly, it was an attack on Ava. Later that evening, Ethan met with Ava at their usual quiet cafe. Her face was a little pale, and her smile was forced, but she still tried to appear calm. Ethan could see right through her. "What's wrong?" Ava asked softly, noticing the tension in his eyes. "I got a call today. Mark Reynolds. He's made it clear that he's going to use Mitchell Enterprises to get what he wants. He's trying to manipulate your family, and he knows that if he can't get to you, he'll get to me." Ava's eyes widened with shock. She knew Mark from the business world, but she hadn't realized just how far he was willing to go. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "We have to be careful," Ethan said, his hand reaching across the table to hold hers. "This is bigger than I thought. Mark has a way of getting people to do what he wants, and, if we're not careful, he's going to tear us apart." Ava felt a mix of fear and determination. For so long, she had tried to keep her family's business out of her personal life. But now, she realized that her love for Ethan and the life they wanted to build together were directly in the crosshairs of people who would stop at nothing to tear it down. "We can't let him win," Ava said, her voice firm. "I won't let him hurt you, Ethan. Not now. Not after everything we've been through." Ethan looked at her, his heart swelling with admiration for her strength. She had always been strong, but now he saw something different in her, a fire that matched his own. "We'll fight this together," Ethan said, leaning in and gently brushing his lips against her hand. "You and me. No one is going to come between us." The next few days were filled with intense preparation. Ethan knew that Mark wouldn't stop at just business tactics. He would use every dirty trick in the book to try and break their relationship apart. Ava worked alongside Ethan, contacting her family's legal team, preparing for any move Mark might make, but she also felt the fear that came with realizing just how deep her involvement in this world went. Ava took a deep breath as she sat in a private meeting with her father, the tension between them thick as ever. She had fought so hard to break free of the grip of her family's expectations, and now it seemed like the very thing she had feared was coming to fruition. "Dad," she said, her voice calm but firm, "there's something I need you to understand. Ethan and I are in this together. Mark Reynolds isn't going to break us, and I'm not going to let him destroy everything we've worked for." Richard Mitchell looked at his daughter, his expression unreadable. "Ava, you have no idea what you're up against. This isn't just about love. It's about power." "I know what it's about, Dad," Ava said, her eyes locking with his. "And I'm choosing to fight for what's right. I'm not backing down," as the battle for Mitchell Enterprises raged on. Ethan and Ava found themselves standing together against the forces that sought to tear them apart. It wasn't just business anymore, it was personal, and Mark Reynolds wouldn't stop until he had destroyed everything they held dear. The days following the tense conversation between Ava and her father had been long and difficult. Ethan and Ava knew they were standing at a crossroads. The weight of their family's expectations, the pressure from the business world, and the unresolved emotions from their past all seemed to be colliding in ways they couldn't escape. But this time, they were prepared. They had made their decision. They were going to face everything together. The evening was cool and crisp, the night sky darkened by the city lights. Ethan stood by the window of his office at Blackstone Enterprises, looking out at the skyline. His mind was racing. The battle for control of Mitchell Enterprises had reached its peak. Mark Reynolds was making his final moves, using every tactic he had in his arsenal to tear down the legacy that Ava's family had worked so hard to build. But the game had changed. Ethan wasn't just fighting for his career anymore. He was fighting for Ava and their future together. He wasn't going to let Mark win. He couldn't. He grabbed his phone and dialed Ava's number, his fingers trembling as he held it to his ear. The call rang once, then twice, and just as he was about to hang up, she answered. Ethan, her voice was quiet, but there was an edge of determination in it. What's the next move? I've spoken with the board, Ethan said, his voice steady. We have one chance to take back control of Mitchell Enterprises. Mark is pulling strings behind the scenes, trying to force Ava's father into a corner. But we've got leverage. If we can push the right buttons, we can stop him. Ava felt her heart race. She knew this was the moment when everything they had worked for would either succeed or fail. That night, Ethan and Ava met in the quiet cafe they had visited the first time they had truly talked about their feelings. The familiar surroundings gave them both comfort, but tonight there was a palpable tension in the air. Mark Reynolds had played his cards, and now it was their turn. I've been talking to my legal team, Ava said, her voice low. We have a way to fight back. We can push for a vote on the board, challenge Mark's influence, and expose his manipulation. Ethan looked at her, admiration for her strength flooding through him. We can do this, but it won't be easy. We have to be smart, strategic, Ava nodded. I know, but I'm ready. I can't keep running away from this. If we're going to be together, we have to do it on our terms. The weight of her words hit Ethan in that moment. They were no longer just fighting for business, success, or legacy. They were fighting for their love, their future. They were going to face the world together. No matter how powerful their enemies were, the next few days were a blur of meetings, calls, and legal strategies. Ava and Ethan worked side by side, staying up late into the night to finalize their plans. Mark Reynolds wasn't going to back down easily, and they knew that. But for the first time, they had a plan that could truly stop him. It was Friday afternoon, the day before the crucial board meeting, when the unexpected happened. Ethan received a call from his lawyer that sent a chill down his spine. Mr. Carter, the lawyer said, his voice tense, I've just received word that Mark Reynolds is planning to make a move against you tomorrow. He's going to try to take you down in front of the board. He's got dirt on you, Ethan, stuff from your past. And if he gets this to the press, it could destroy everything. Ethan's mind raced. He had worked so hard to build his career, his company, and now it all seemed to be crumbling in an instant. Mark wasn't just trying to take his company. He was trying to destroy him personally. But Ethan knew he couldn't back down. He took a deep breath, his hand gripping the edge of his desk. I don't care what he has on me. I won't let him win. Prepare everything for tomorrow. We're going to take this head on the next day. The atmosphere in the Mitchell Enterprises boardroom was thick with tension. Ava sat beside Ethan, both of them poised and ready to face the storm ahead. The meeting had been called to decide the future of the company Ava's father's legacy, and the fight for control was about to begin. Mark Reynolds stood at the front of the room, his smug smile betraying his confidence. I've gathered this board today to discuss the future of Mitchell Enterprises, and it's clear that the leadership of this company has failed. Ava has been absent in the most crucial moments, and we can no longer ignore the influence of outsiders like Ethan Carter, who do not belong in our world. Ava's father looked at her, disappointment written all over his face, but Ava didn't flinch. She had made up her mind. She wasn't going to let her father control her anymore. Ethan has been nothing but loyal to this company, she said, standing up with determination. And he has more than proven his worth. Mark is here because he's trying to manipulate us all for his own gain. The room fell silent as Ava continued, her voice unwavering. We have the evidence to prove that Mark has been working behind the scenes to undermine this company, using illegal tactics to pressure the board into making decisions that benefit him. We won't stand for this. Ethan stood beside her, his gaze fixed on Mark, who looked like he was ready to explode. I'm not here to tear this company apart. I'm here to protect it and the people who have been loyal to it. This is about integrity, not power. The boardroom was silent, the tension palpable as everyone waited for a response. Finally, Ava's father stood up, his expression hard. Ava, I see now that you're not just trying to protect me or this company. You're fighting for what's right. For the first time, I'm proud of the woman you've become. Mark Reynolds' plan had backfired. The board voted overwhelmingly in favor of Ava and Ethan, and Mark was ousted from the company. He stormed out of the room, but not before Ethan made sure that his actions were exposed to the press. The fight had been won. Mitchell Enterprises was safe, and Ava had not only proved her loyalty to Ethan, but also to herself. She had stood up to her father, to her past, and to the expectations that had defined her life for so long. 3 years had passed since Ava and Ethan had fought for their love and future. They had faced obstacles that seemed insurmountable, and yet here they were, stronger than ever. Standing side by side, Ethan had become the CEO of Blackstone Enterprises, the company that had once seemed so out of reach. He had proven himself not only as a businessman, but as a leader, someone who had built something incredible from the ground up. Ava, on the other hand, had become the first female co-chair of Mitchell Enterprises, transforming the family business into a more modern, ethical, and successful entity. Together, they had defied all odds. Together, they had shown the world that love, integrity, and ambition could coexist. But their success was not without its challenges. The road to building a future together had been difficult. There had been times when they had both questioned whether they were doing the right thing. But no matter what, they had always found a way back to each other. It was an early morning in New York City, and Ava was sitting at her desk in her sleek, modern office at Mitchell Enterprises. The city outside her window buzzed with life, but in the quiet of her office, she found a moment of peace. Today was different from any other day. Today, Ava was about to make a big decision, one that would shape the future of both her family and Ethan's company. She had spent months preparing for this, carefully weighing every option, considering the impact it would have on everything they had built. Just then, the door to her office opened and Ethan walked in, looking as confident and handsome as ever. His dark suit was perfectly tailored, his expression focused but soft as he smiled at her. "Good morning, gorgeous," he said, his voice low and warm. Ava looked up, her heart skipping a beat. No matter how many times she saw him, his presence still made her heart race. There was something about the way he looked at her, something that made her feel like she was the most important person in the world. "Good morning, Ethan," she replied, smiling as he walked over to her desk and sat down across from her. "How's your morning so far?" "Busy," he said with a chuckle, but his smile faded slightly as he studied her face. "But I can tell something's on your mind. What's going on?" Ava took a deep breath, her fingers tapping lightly on the edge of the desk. I have to make a decision today, one that could affect both of our companies. Ethan leaned forward, his brow furrowing with concern. What decision? Ava hesitated for a moment before meeting his gaze. I've been approached by a major international firm. They want to buy Mitchell Enterprises, or at least take a controlling share. The deal would mean millions in profits for us, but it would change everything. I would lose control over the company, and you'd lose the chance to run it alongside me. Ethan's face grew serious as he processed the information. He knew that Mitchell Enterprises was Ava's family legacy, but he also knew how much she had changed the company in the last few years. She had modernized it, expanded it, and made it into something much more ethical and forward-thinking. But selling to an international firm would put that all at risk. He reached across the desk, taking her hand in his. What do you want, Ava? Ava stared down at their hands for a moment, feeling the weight of the decision. She had worked so hard to make Mitchell Enterprises a place where both her vision and Ethan's could thrive. But at the same time, the opportunity to grow the company exponentially was hard to pass up. It was an opportunity to put her family's business on the map in ways she had never imagined. I want to make sure we're doing what's best for everyone, she said softly. I want to keep the company independent, but I also don't want us to miss out on the chance to expand globally. I don't want to lose everything we've worked for. Ethan nodded thoughtfully. You've always known what's best for this company, Ava, and for us. If you believe this is the right move, I'll support you, no matter what. Ava looked at him, her heart swelling with love. He had always been her biggest supporter, never once questioning her decisions, never once doubting her abilities. But this was different. This was a crossroads, not just for the company, but for their future. We'll figure it out, she said, more to herself than to him. Together, later that evening, after a long day of meetings and decisions, Ava and Ethan found themselves walking hand in hand through the streets of the city. It was a familiar comfort, one that they had shared many times before. The chaos of their respective careers, the weight of their responsibilities, they had learned to navigate it together. This is it, isn't it? Ava said, her voice quiet as they walked side by side. The point where we decide what's next. Ethan stopped and turned to face her, gently cupping her face in his hands. Whatever happens, I'm with you. I'll always be with you. Ava smiled softly, a tear slipping down her cheek. I don't know what I'd do without you. Ethan, you've been my rock, and you've been mine, he whispered, leaning in to kiss her forehead. For a moment, they stood there in the middle of the busy street, lost in the quiet of their shared bond. Their journey together hadn't been easy, but they had come so far. They had fought for their love, for their careers, and for the life they wanted. And now, more than ever, they knew they were ready to face whatever came next. The next day, Ava made her decision. She had decided to negotiate with the international firm, but with strict terms that would allow her to keep control of the company. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but with Ethan by her side, she felt invincible as she signed the documents and sent them to the firm. She realized something. It wasn't just about business or family anymore. It was about her. It was about her choosing what was best for herself and the man she loved.